Good evening, viewers. Welcome back to my channel, Literati. Today, I will talk about Keats's Ode to a Nightingale and about the Romantics in general. First, I will try to look at the background of Keats and the Romantic poets. Just a brief look to understand Keats's sensibility, which was similar to that of the other Romantics like Wordsworth, Coleridge, Shelley, and Lord Byron. The greatest thing about the Romantics was that they followed the same ideals, but they were also very original and individual in their approach. In fact, individuality is, along with the imagination and emotion, is one of the chiefest characteristics of these great Romantics who together created the greatest period in English poetry. So who were these Romantics? We all know William Wordsworth, who was the senior most, then Coleridge, Shelley, Keats, and finally Lord Byron. All these great Romantics were born in the last decades of the 18th century, and the Romantic period lasted from 1798 to roughly in poetry around 1835, with the death of Coleridge, and William Wordsworth himself passed away in 1850. Shelley, Keats, and Lord Byron, they passed away within a few years of each other. If we want to consider the biological date, William Wordsworth, who was the oldest of this glorious group, 1770 to 1850, Coleridge, 1772 to 1834, Keats, 1795 to 1821, Shelley, 1792 to 1822, Lord Byron, 1788 to 1829. So the Shelley, Lord Byron, and Keats were very young men, and they did not have very long lives. They all died young. Wordsworth lived up till 1850, and Coleridge died in 1834. We will concentrate on Keats and one of his greatest odes, that is Ode to a Nightingale. First, let us understand what exactly the poetic form ode means. There are many odes written by many poets in English literature. Keats's odes, 6 of them, are all very beautiful, very well known, and they are certainly among the best forms of odes, the best expressions in ode. His Ode to a Nightingale is in a class of its own, which has it has a particular kind of place in the realm of English literature and also in the poetic consciousness. It has always been read and loved, and we can go back to it again and again and find new meanings in it. So it has been analyzed also many times over. I will try to find some new aspect, though the basic theme is the same: the search for beauty and the transience of life. Now, an ode is an elevated form of expression, usually addressed to something or someone. It shows a refinement of expression, and it is perfectly composed. Another thing about Ode to a Nightingale is that the nightingale remains not only a bird, but it becomes a symbol of something perfect, something which, though transient, yet leaves a lasting impact. Now, another aspect of Ode to a Nightingale is that the nightingale may be or maybe not a real bird. Symbolism in English poetry was a movement which started in the late 19th century, not only in literature and poetry in particular, but also in painting and so on. It was influenced by the French movement in symbolism. And we remember that this Ode to a Nightingale was written in 1819. So obviously before the movement of symbolism formally began. Now, what does symbolism actually mean? It means that something, a real object, becomes a metaphor. It can be interpreted in many ways through imagination and through emotion. It might be a physical reality, but it also has a symbolic meaning. And symbolism is a very important part, not exactly the movement, but symbolic images are very much a part of romantic poetry, where we find that nature, which was the main inspiration for these romantic poets, for whom imagination and emotion were the predominant aspects of their poetry, they relied on symbols from nature. So Wordsworth's daffodils becomes a part of enduring hope, or it becomes a symbol of enduring hope. The skylark singing freely in the birds becomes a sign of a symbol of independence and joy to both Wordsworth and Shelley. And of course, for Coleridge, the mystical, the mysterious, and the exotic and the imaginary reality becomes a symbol of the real world. Now, Ode to a Nightingale uses nightingale as a symbol. Symbolism and imagism, these are two aspects of poetry which often go together, and the dividing line between them is often elastic, or it is fluid, because imagism, which was a movement in the early 20th century, was also using something, an object, a real object, or an image as representing something. But in imagism, there are not too many interpretations of the image. It represents a physical reality, while in symbolism, the symbol represents an emotional reality. Symbolism is indirect, it is metaphorical, while imagism, or the images, believed in something real, direct, and physical. It represents a physical reality. Symbolism expresses the meaning indirectly. We can contrast the two very famous examples of symbolism and imagism when we look at Ode to a Nightingale, which is a nightingale is a symbol, and we look at T.S. Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, where the sky is the image of a patient etherized upon an operating table, an image of physical sickness. The use of symbols by the Romantics influenced the movement of symbolism heavily, which began in the late 19th century. I will analyze Ode to a Nightingale in detail. Today, and my lecture on Ode to a Nightingale will be in two parts. Today, I would rather like to take a closer look at Keats, since I will be discussing Keats's Ode to a Nightingale. About Keats's early background, he came from a well-to-do family. He was obviously, like all the poets who have great imagination, very sensitive. He was very imaginative. He was highly intelligent. Interestingly, Keats, who is known as an aesthete, someone who worshipped beauty, someone who was inspired by loveliness, was certified as the apprentice of a surgeon. So he was a surgeon's apprentice, and he actually passed all his exams, and he was a certified uh, surgeon after 4 years of study. Otherwise, in his personal life, he suffered some losses, some personal losses, the loss of his father at a very early age, his grandfather to whom he was very close, his mother, his uncle, and the main element behind Ode to a Nightingale, or the main sentiment which sort of created this beautiful ode with its feelings of wistfulness and longing and yearning and sort of a deep pessimism, was the death of his brother from tuberculosis. Later on, Keats also died of the same disease. As a person, some critics have criticized him as being over-intelligent, oversensitive, highly strung, almost to the point of being neurotic, and someone who was an aesthete, that is, someone who was a person who longed for perfection, a perfection which did not exist in this world, and which led him to pessimism. All that might be true, but Matthew Arnold, the critic, has compared him, or the loveliness of his poems, to that of Shakespeare. And at the same time, some critics say that he is self-indulgent. He likes to indulge his emotions too much. He is a poet who has a feeling of escapism. He tries to take refuge in his imagination. So these aspects of Keats may be or may not be true. Certainly he was intelligent. I don't know about being over-intelligent, but he was a young person. He was a youth who was melancholy. And interestingly, his closest contemporary, that is Shelley, was exactly the very opposite. He was an optimist who was sort of carried away by his hopes and his enthusiasm and his ideals. But like I said, all these great romantics, Wordsworth, Coleridge, Shelley, Keats, and Lord Byron, they were certainly idealists. They were full of youthful dreams and that energy. And though inspired by the same ideals, they all had a vision which was uniquely personal, very individual, and very original. So Ode to a Nightingale is an ode which is perfect in every aspect. And I will discuss Ode to a Nightingale in the next lecture, which I will upload. Please keep on watching and subscribe to my channel, Literati.